welcome. I'm Sergeant Balzer with the Suffolk Police Department, and I'd like to take this time to welcome you to our first ever, what we have titled Safe Hands. And we have a couple of speakers tonight that they are going to kind of walk you through some of the steps of why we do what we do, why our dispatchers, dispatcher Erin Hughes, she's one of our supervisors, why the mental health services, Karen Nicely from Western Tidewater Community Services Board, she'll be speaking with you. And we just want to kind of make you more aware of the services that are available. And I think most of you have been in the other room next door where we had some light refreshments. We also had a couple of displays set up from like Project Lifesaver. We also have someone from the Veterans Association, because we deal with all types of working with people that come into types of crisis situation. When we originally first started in this program, which was back in 2006, it was in reference to just dealing with people that had some mental health issues. It has now expanded, and it includes not only mental health issues, but Alzheimer's, autism, wounded warrior, which is the veterans returning from overseas. What we'd like to do is just give you a little glimpse of why we ask the questions we ask, why we do what we do on scene, and why Western Tidewater has to do what they do when someone is in a crisis situation. So with that, I would like to introduce again Erin Hughes from our dispatch. She's going to talk a little bit about what they do and why they ask what they ask.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Erin Hughes. I'm a dispatch supervisor here with Suffolk Police Department. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we ask some of the questions we ask. One of the most common things that happens is someone's in some sort of crisis. They call 911 and we're asking questions we need to ask, and we hear, just get them here. Stop asking all these questions, just get them here. They're coming. So let me just start with that, and I'll explain to you what happens behind the scenes in our room while we're talking. 911 dispatchers, what do we really know? All of our emergency communications operators are certified by the Department of Criminal Justice Services and Basic Dispatch. So we've all been to school. It's not the same as what a police officer goes through, but we do have certain requirements. We are regulated by DCJS, so we do have certifications. We're all certified in CPR as well as emergency medical dispatch. So if there's a medical problem and we need to give instructions, we're certified to do that. We also attend additional classes in different areas of expertise. I'm one of the crisis intervention instructors for our department, so that's one of those additional classes. We are working towards the goal of making 100% of our dispatchers and call takers certified in crisis intervention. We attend, at this time, our dispatchers attend the same training for crisis intervention that our police officers attend. Same class, right next to them at the same time. So we have the same information we get the same information that they get. We learn the same techniques that they learn. We have access to the same resources that they do. So if it's a resource question, that's something that we can help with over the phone if you don't necessarily need someone to come out. What information should I provide when calling 911? A lot of people think we ask a lot of questions and they don't quite understand why we ask all the questions we ask. The first thing is your address. We ask you to repeat it for confirmation. It's not because we're not listening, it's because we want to make sure we have it right. So expect to say it twice. It's going to be the very first thing we're going to want to ask you. We're going to want to verify your phone number, even though it comes up on the 911 screen if you call 911. We don't rely on technology. We don't assume it's correct. We need to make sure that that information that we're getting is correct. Also, the reason for the call. Has something specific happened that set off whatever this event or crisis is? What are the symptoms of behavior that are currently present? So what exactly is happening? We are going to ask the following information about the consumer. We're going to want to know their name, A diagnosis. If you all know the diagnosis, we're not trying to be nosy. It lets the officers know while they're on the way to the scene what's happening, what they're going to be dealing with when they're there. We also want to know about physical limitations, conditions, if they're having hallucinations, auditory or visual hallucinations. Those things are important. It helps our officers prepare. And same thing with fire and EMS if they're going. That information helps them prepare so that they know what they're going to be dealing with. The more information we have, the better picture we can paint for them. While we're getting all of this information, another dispatcher in the room is sending help. So just because we're still on the phone doesn't mean they're not on the way. If it's, if you're calling about a vandalism to a vehicle that happened overnight, sure, that might wait until we get off the phone. But something, if there's a crisis, if there's an active disturbance or something like that, somebody else is sending police while we're on the phone still. So it's not delaying a police response. We want to know about weapons availability. We want to know that for a couple of reasons. One, officer safety, but we also want to know for the safety of the people that we're going to. If there's a weapon and we can talk somebody into dropping a weapon before officer arrival, that is a beautiful thing if that person doesn't still have a weapon in their hand when a police officer arrives on scene. The officers are relieved because it takes that out of the equation and they can just deal with whatever the situation is at hand. And then the family doesn't have to be there for that type of situation either. We want to know about medications. Are they taking prescribed medications? Are they being used properly? Are they being abused? Is it someone who's been prescribed medication but they haven't been taking it, or they ran out, or they're not taking what they're supposed to take, or they're drinking with it and they're not supposed to? All of that information lets them know, because if someone's been on something and regulated and then they go off their medication, it lets the officers know what to anticipate. Any current drug or alcohol use is also important. If you all have that information, please tell us. We're not asking because we want people arrested. We're asking because it lets them know what to be prepared for upon arrival. History information. Is it someone who has a history of violence? Do they have past negative interactions with police? Some people don't trust the police, and so it takes a lot to build up that trust when they get there. That's important for them to know because it can change how they approach the person. Fear of police. Again, same thing. If they are aware that someone is very, very afraid of police, sometimes the dispatchers can talk to them ahead of time, gain their trust. Hey, you know what? The person that's coming is a friend of mine. They got extra special training. That information lets them know this is someone who's going to care about me, because that person on the phone cares about me too. So sometimes putting us on the phone with the person can be helpful as well. Anything additional that is helpful with interaction, likes, dislikes. I know there's a consumer in one part of the city who likes a particular kind of candy, and the officers know that person likes that kind of candy. And if they've dealt with them and they have that kind of candy, they know when they're going to that house, all right, let me pop the trunk and get that out, and I know that'll help. So any kind of information like that, let us know. Same thing, dislikes. What do they not respond to? Because they don't want to say the wrong thing. If we can have that information and they know that that person doesn't like teddy bears, we're not going to say anything about teddy bears if we know. So that kind of information helps the officers. Specific fears. Some people don't like to be touched. They don't like somebody getting too close to them. They're afraid of uniforms. They're afraid of confined spaces. Things like that are helpful to the officers to know so that they can be aware. Everybody's different. Everybody's got certain things that affect them. If they have that information, it can make a world of difference in that interaction. Why do we want this information? The responding officers can prepare mentally for the situation, so it can reduce the stress for everybody involved. Officers can begin coordinating with mental health personnel on how best to assist the consumer. They can also tailor their response to the consumer more effectively. What do we do with all of this? Well, we provide all this information to the responding officers. Anytime we get information like that, we enter it in our computer system in the call for service. So while they're on the way, it comes across their computer screen, and we put it over the radio, the necessary information, so they know prior to arrival. We can sometimes use some of the information to help calm down a volatile situation. I know I've talked weapons out of people's hands on multiple occasions before the police get there. It helps. It helps everybody. Nobody wants to see, their family member go through that type of situation. If we can talk a weapon out of a hand before they get there, everybody's happy. We can also provide instructions for family members about what to expect upon police arrival. It could be an overdose situation or something where they need medical attention. We can tell you, yes, we have the fire department and the rescue squad on the way, but they're going to stage until the police get there and they know that it's safe for them to enter. They're there, they're coming, but we need to get the police to make sure that they're going to be safe first too. So we can give instructions. The emergency communications operators in the city of Suffolk are highly trained members of the emergency services team. We relay important information to the officers and responders so they can handle the situation as efficiently as possible. We also have access to many resources. So I'd said we get the same information about resources as the officers do. Sometimes people are just at their wits' end and they don't know what to do or where to turn. The caregivers are just as affected, and we know that. I've taken calls from caregivers of Alzheimer's patients, and they just don't know what to do. They don't necessarily need the police to come out. They just don't know what to do. So that's a matter of providing a phone number for organizations and resources that can be helpful. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes you don't need anybody to respond. You just need resources, and we can do that as well. So don't feel like just because you call us, we don't necessarily have to send somebody, depending on what the circumstances are. And we're happy to do that. I've been just a sounding board for somebody, and I've said, is there anything else I can do? No, I feel better. And that's okay. As long as I don't have something else that I absolutely have to do right that second, I will sit and listen. We all will sit and listen. If there's not an emergency, but assistance or general information is needed, we do have a non-emergency number. Of course, we didn't print these out, but the non-emergency number for the police department can be called. It's 923-2350, and our option is 0 for dispatch. So if you just need resources or something like that, we can provide that information if someone doesn't necessarily have to respond. Are we doing questions or no?
Did y'all have any questions from Dispatcher Hughes? Anyone?
Thank you all.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me apologize for making that big racket a few minutes ago. Our beautiful young media specialist in the back wired me up with this thing, and I didn't do well with it. So I kind of made a loud racket, and I'm not wired up like I should be. So I am going to turn this just a little bit so I can look at this wonderful PowerPoint thing that we put together and talk to you about a little bit about CIT. What Aaron Hughes told you about what the dispatcher does, I need to add a little bit to that and tell you that the dispatchers are our lifeline. We depend on them greatly as officers responding to scenes. I've often said that I wouldn't have made it through my rookie years without those dispatchers providing me that information. Because when I get on scene, I want to give the citizens of Suffolk the best possible service that I can provide. And it's what we train all of our officers to do as well, is to take a look at what kind of call they're responding to, what the needs are for that consumer. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit prior to getting started, the crisis intervention team, the assessment site, and the voluntary early intervention. Oftentimes, we as officers, we're called to deal with individuals threatening to harm themselves. Anything could happen. Our priorities always, always, always are safety for us, safety for the individual, safety for the citizen that's calling us. That is our primary goal. Always has been, and I believe that it always will be. Our chief of police and our command staff are very committed to the needs of the citizens in regards to mental health. To that degree, we partnered up with Western Tidewater Community Services Board. 2006, we sent officers for training. We partnered up with Karen Nicely and Western Tidewater back in 2010, Karen, somewhere in there. And we've built that relationship. We work hand in hand in our training, in our what we call now the assessment site, and for the needs of citizens. What we do in regards to intervention and criminal investigation. I want to talk a little bit about that, in the difference between intervention and criminal investigation. The goal right now is when we are dealing with someone that is in a crisis situation, what we want to do is we want to get them stabilized, and we want to provide them mental health services first. Sometimes we have to end up charging a person with a criminal charge. But our goal is to make sure that they are safe first and that they are stabilized out of that crisis situation. We've had numerous cases where we will go and we will respond to an incident where they are in such a crisis situation that even though they've committed a crime, we don't want to put them into the criminal justice system without the help that they need for a number of reasons. Most of you may or may not know this, but for us, Western Tidewater Regional Jail, any of the criminal facilities, jail facilities, for someone that has a disability, a mental disability or illness or anything that's going on, if they have prescribed medication, the jails cannot force you to take that medication. If they're being treated on the psychiatric side, they can get them stabilized. They are required to take their medications. So our goal is, if they need help first, we want to put them into that help situation where they can get that stabilization. It's been proven that most people, that if they can get the help that they can require by either medication or counseling, they can be productive citizens just like anybody else. They can lead as normal a life as anyone else. There are huge success stories out there. But if they're in jail and they're not getting the treatment that they need, then they can just slide down even further. And that's not the goal of what we want to see happen to those people that do have some type of mental illness or disability. So our goal is to determine, once we get on call, is it something that we can do an intervention with? Can we get that consumer and that family to do a voluntary and go seek treatment at Western Tidewater Community Services Board first, before it even escalates further where there is a crime that has occurred? Can we intervene in that situation and calm down someone instead of it becoming a domestic violence situation? We've had several cases involving autism, Alzheimer's. We had a case specifically with an elderly couple where she was suffering from some Alzheimer's and she was primary caregiver. And her husband was in a wheelchair with an oxygen tank. And she was in the throes of a break, dementia, and she bit him. Well, the law says that we can arrest, or we will arrest, for domestic assault. But she has Alzheimer's going on. So do we need to go and lock her up, or can we get her some help? Can we contact the Autism Society, or maybe Adult Protective Services? What about our family physician that might say, hey, it's time, we're going to have to maybe seek to put her in a facility or something like that? Those are the options that we train for, and we're trying to better ourselves at, versus just automatically saying, you're a bad person and we need to lock you up. If we have to charge, we're going to charge in the end, but the hope is to get you that stabilization first, okay? What does police custody involve? Most often with police custody, it involves handcuffs. And that is very traumatic for a lot of families, especially when you've called us for help. Help, help. My son is bipolar and he's having a break. And we get there and we have to handcuff him. And families don't understand that. They've called us for help. The reason that we do that is for safety. It's for the safety of the officer. It's for the safety of that person that's in a break. We can control better. Because a lot of times when someone's in a psychotic break or episode, or there's Alzheimer's going on or autism, if we can cocoon them in, for lack of a better word, if we can, I don't want to say encapsulate, but if we can just hold them in a little bit, that's where the handcuffs come in. It's for the safety of everybody. And a lot of times families don't understand that. We show up and all they see is that we're handcuffing someone. We train our officers to, when they respond, if there's family involved, young children, we try not to handcuff in the presence of children. We'll ask you to remove your children to another room. A lot of times the citizen won't understand that. What do you mean I have to take my kids out of the room? It's not that we're trying to do anything other than protect your children from seeing something. You don't want them to see mom or grandfather or sister, uncle, brother, daughter, son placed in handcuffs. We'll ask you something simple like that. So there's a reason why we ask you to do some of the things we do. We're not trying to make it more difficult. We want to make this the easiest thing ever for you. We're not out to, if we have to handcuff someone for safety, or even if we do have to arrest, we still try to make that transition happen with as much dignity as possible for everyone. Police vehicles. Why we put someone in our police vehicles in the back seat? Why can't we put them in the front seat? Well, for one, most of our officers have a lot of their equipment in the front seat. So to put someone in the front seat, that officer now has to move everything out of that front seat, which takes time, and try to make room in his trunk, which that's virtually impossible now with all the equipment we carry, or stuff it in the back seat, which means it's not readily available for him. So what we are required to do is put them in the back seat. And there's a shield. Well, the shield is there for a safety reason, not only for the officer, but also for that person that we have now taken into custody. Let's just say that something occurs where the officer, hopefully this doesn't happen, but let's just say that there's an accident. It's protection. That shield protects that consumer. We seat belt them in. It's the law, it's what's required. We're certainly not going to transport someone and not make them as safe as possible. That shield gives us that option. When we take someone into custody for, let's say, what we call an emergency custody order, what we do is we immediately call Western Tidewater Community Service Board. Now there's a couple of ways that we can get an emergency custody order. One is by what we call police badge. The officer has the authority, if he is on scene and he recognizes through his training, his skills and ability, that someone is in a crisis mode and might need some help, we can do what we call a badge emergency custody order. And we can take them into custody, and we will immediately contact Western Tidewater and say, hey, just to let you know, we've got someone that we're bringing in. We found them out on the street, and they had a knife, and they were cutting themselves. So we're going to take them down to Western Tidewater. They may tell us to take them to the hospital. They may need some medical clearance first. They could have some things going on. A lot of times our person that's in crisis, they may have something like diabetes, or they might have high blood pressure, and because of their psychotic break, they've now elevated that blood pressure. They might need some medical treatment first. And Western Tidewater will be there hand in hand with OBC, because that's where we go, evaluating them while OBC ER doctors are also medically clearing them to get them the best help that they need. So we're going to automatically reach out if we do a badge ECO. The other way for us to receive an ECO is if you, the family, goes down to the magistrate and you say, I have someone in my family that is really not functioning well. You explain to them exactly what's going on. They've overdosed on pills or something along those lines, and you feel that they need to be evaluated. Then they will give you what they call the emergency custody order. They will automatically contact Ms. Hughes at dispatch or one of our other dispatchers and say, we have an emergency custody order for so-and-so. Please go pick them up. The moment we pick them up, we are going to immediately contact Western Tidewater again and say, this is what we have, we're en route. And again, they will tell us either come here or go to the hospital. Once they're there and in custody, they can be, the laws have changed, and they're continually changing. As most of you know, across the nation right now, there is just huge, you can't turn on the news without seeing something on the news about how police have done something wrong with someone that's in a crisis situation. It's like any other profession, guys. There are a very small handful of officers that have not made the correct decisions. But that's why we train. That's why our department is dedicated to training. We have approximately 186 officers. Is that right, Lieutenant? Somewhere in that neighborhood? We are currently at about 65 of our officers that are trained as CIT, crisis intervention officers. They'll wear a little pin. You'll see it. It's circular, and it says CIT on it. Our goal is to get even more trained if we can. It's a 40-hour class. We train in all kinds of issues. Our training not only, when I first started out, it only dealt with mental health, such as depression, suicide, bipolar. It now encompasses so much more. It encompasses, as I said, the Alzheimer's, dementia, which is our geriatric set. It includes the kids which suffer from ADHD, ODD, bipolar, or the big one, which is autism. This is something that is very personal for me and for a lot of our officers. You can ask them. If you talk to a lot of our CIT officers, they're very familiar with what goes on with autism or Alzheimer's or even PTSD with the what we like to call the Wounded Warrior Project. We have officers that are prior military. I am the grandmother of 2 autistic grandsons. One is 10, one is 7. The 7-year-old is nonverbal. We don't know that he will ever talk. He's not trained yet. That's a huge issue for me to think that if something happens to him in the city that he lives in Chesapeake, and that there's an officer that is not trained and comes into contact with my grandson and doesn't treat him right. I want to treat you like I expect my family to be treated by officers. The 10-year-old, he's high functioning, but he's very literal. So normally if an officer goes on scene and he says something as simple as, "Let me see your hands," most people know to do what? If I was to ask this room right now, "Let me see your hands," what would you do? Let me see your hands. But my grandson is going to do like you and want to get in my space and show me his hands, because that's what I just asked him to do. So for me, the dealing with the autism is very personal. It's also very personal because my father passed away from Alzheimer's. My mother has now been diagnosed with early Alzheimer's dementia. I want to know that the police officers that come into contact with her have that skill and that ability, that training to deal with someone like that. If you look at the statistics in reference to some of the illnesses, and by the way, Alzheimer's and dementia is not an illness. It is considered a disease. So we lump it under dealing with the mentally ill because we're coming into contact with it so much, okay? But these are specific things that all of our officers are dealing with, and we want our officers to be the best prepared that they can be. And that's why we wanted to come forward to you and show you what we are all about, to let you know we're not just putting our officers out on the street without that training. We now do additional training in dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder with the wounded warriors that are coming back. We've had cases where we had a young man one night that wanted to do officer suicide by cop. He grabbed a shotgun and ran out of the house. And at the last minute, he chickened out, tossed the gun to the ground. But we're training our officers in how to communicate with those wounded warriors. And that's exactly what they're called, wounded warriors. Our crisis intervention team leaders, there's actually 3 of us right now, so we're growing. Originally, it was just 1. We're now up to 3. Lieutenant Garvin, she heads us up. Sergeant Balzer, which is me, and then we have another sergeant, Sergeant Long. And we are the ones that coordinate with Western Tidewater and when we do our training. We just held a class in March. Was it March? We had the max capacity for us for classes is up to 22 students because it's so intensive. We do role playing. We bring in the Autism Society. We bring in Alzheimer's. We bring in NAMI, which NAMI is the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. Did I get that right, Karen? Yeah. Okay. They come in and they speak. We have doctors that come in and talk about drugs and what to look for when we're dealing with people that are in crisis situations. For a lot of our consumers that have issues, and Karen will talk more about this, I'm sure, in reference to a lot of people that are prescribed medication. It's like any other medication. Most of us that take, say, we go in for, let's say we have an infection and the doctor gives us an antibiotic. For most of us in here, maybe it's a 10-day cycle. And about the 6th day, we get tired of taking that medication and we stop. Most of us never finish the prescription. It's the same thing with people that have a prescription for, let's say, antidepressant medication. They start feeling better, which is what the medication is designed to do. But because they're feeling better, then they say, well, I don't need this medication, and they toss it. And then a little while goes by, and all of a sudden they're in a crisis situation, and we've got to deal with that. Which goes back to why the dispatchers ask, what kind of medication is this person on that's in a crisis situation? We want to know the best way we can to help them. If we end up having to take them to jail, most of our officers know to ask this. If you are the citizen calling in for your family member, they're probably going to ask you, do they have the medication here, and can I take it with me? Because they can give that to the jail if we have to go to the jail, if the crime is that serious. And by the way, Western Tidewater will talk about this. They are present at Western Tidewater Regional Jail. They have counselors that regularly are daily. Is that correct, Karen? Every day they're at the jail. So the counseling is on scene. So there's some of the things that we do. I talked a little bit about the 40 hours of in-depth training for officers. And by the way, this 40-hour class, is a pass or fail. It is not a class that they can go into and just automatically graduate at the end of the 40 hours. They are tested the whole way through. The very first day, we have a team of instructors. Usually it's between 7 to 10 of us. Some of them are state certified instructors. The rest come from our department. We will start evaluating the first day, and if we don't like what we see with the student, with the officer, if we don't feel like they have the right temperament or the right amount of compassion, that this isn't a good fit for them, we're not going to let them continue in the class. We have actually put officers out of this class. If it gets down to it on the last day of the role play and they are still not functioning well, we are not going to graduate them. They have the option of coming back and repeating a class, and we've actually had an officer that did that. Second day in, he thought he knew it all and had all the answers, and the instructors didn't like what they saw, and we made him return to the streets. And he realized the importance of this class. So he came back to our next class and graduated with flying colors. He actually got the class award, because we always select the best of the class, and he got that award. And he realized how serious this training is and how committed our department is to training our officers to deal with these types of situations. It's one of the reasons that as we build history on someone, as our officers are responding to calls, I expect my officers to look at that call history for that person and know what they are dealing with. It's also why I expect that from the dispatchers. And my dispatchers have never let me down. They're quickly telling me as I'm driving to a situation, this is who you have. This is what they're doing. This is what we know, to aid us in keeping everybody safe. Again, our goal is to have 100% of all of our dispatchers trained. We're working towards that. We've exceeded our 20% of officers, which is good news. There are a lot of departments out there that still do not have crisis intervention officers trained. I think Norfolk was the last one 2 years ago, came on scene with their crisis intervention team. They realized how critical it is to have officers trained to deal with this. We also have a mental health first aid class. It's an 8-hour course. Our chief is requiring it of all officers. This is not an option. This is not something that you get to say, oh, I think I want to be a CIT officer. This training is mandatory. It's taught by Western Tidewater Community Service Board. They come to our headquarters and teach the class. It is the first step to CIT training. And it also provides with basic assessment skills. So this is an important part of the curriculum that we are teaching in our department. The commitment process, I touched a little bit on that, about immediately as we have taken someone into an emergency custody, we are going to reach out. Most of the time I get Karen on the phone. We've often had late night talks as well. It's kind of a 24-hour thing between me and her. The assessment site is located at Northgate. Is everyone aware of where that is at? Off of Godwin Boulevard. You go past Opposite Hospital and Commercial Lane. Make the right. behind Wawa. That's the best way to say it. It's also available for walk-ins. There is someone there every day from 8 to midnight, right? 8 o'clock to midnight. There is a CIT officer, trained officer, on site from 10 o'clock to midnight to assist. If we go to Centera Oversea, of course, that's a medical clearance, as it could be required by the facility for a number of reasons. Also, if there's an injury that occurs to themselves, if they've cut themselves and it requires treatment, they're automatically going to divert to Oversea to get that treatment first, because that's the priority. Inpatient treatment facility, Karen's going to talk more about this, about we don't control the facility that's utilized, and I don't want to take anything away from her because she has important stuff to tell you about that. Again, the best case scenario for everyone is voluntary treatment. If I get on scene and I can convince that person that they just need to go without me, and they agree to it and the family agrees to it, I'm all for it. I'm going to say, thank you. Let us know if you need our help anymore. I'll touch base with Karen to make sure that they came in, because if not, we may need to go back. But they've just agreed to me that they'll go in. I'm more than happy to say, Mom, he says he wants to go down and talk to Miss Karen, go for it. Sometimes for us, and we teach this in our training, is recognizing warning signs. If we get called to a scene of something that's not even related to something that is a mental health issue, but we start seeing just some things going on with a family that we might have some concerns about, some of my officers, if we have time, we'll send them back by just to check, just to make sure everything's going okay. And I believe Karen's going to touch some more on this about after programs that they have, maintaining medication schedule, things like that. That's the end of my slideshow. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you? Anything that I can say that will let you know how committed we are to the citizens in Suffolk about how we are handling calls in reference to anything to do with mental health issues. And by the way, our training is ongoing. Once an officer is CIT trained, we are required, I believe it's every 3 years, by our accreditation to do continuing education in regards to mental health. So it's not just something that we do a one-time training on and, oh, here's our 20% of our officers trained, we're good to go, pat them on the head and keep on going. We are required to continue that training. It's no different than being a school teacher that's required to, I believe every other summer they're usually taking some kind of course to keep their certification up to date. We're required to keep our certifications current and up to date. And we do, to that extent, we do 40 hours each year of in-depth in-service training, and every third year includes mental health. So anyone with any questions? Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you could help me distinguish between an ECO and a TDO.
Sure. I'll touch on it a little bit, and then I'll get Karen to explain it more in depth. An ECO is an emergency custody order. It means that someone is in a crisis situation and they need help. So this is where we are going to respond and assist them with getting to the Mental Health Service Board. And they're going to do an evaluation there. A TDO is what we call a temporary detention order. And what that means is that Karen and her associates have now decided that someone needs treatment or further help. And we're going to end up transporting them to a psychiatric facility where they can get that help. Usually, the cases that I've been involved in, and Karen can correct me if I'm wrong, usually the treatment lasts anywhere from 3 to 5 days, sometimes up to 2 weeks. The goal is to get them stabilized and back home and functioning to the best of their ability, if possible. Sometimes that doesn't always happen. In a perfect world, it would, but we all know that's not going to happen. So that's the difference between emergency custody order is temporary. We're only allowed to do an emergency custody order for 8 hours. At the end of that 8 hours, they have to have figured out whether or not they're going to issue a temporary detention order. If they've determined that not, then we take them back home. That's the difference between the two. Temporary detention order can be for a longer length of time. Emergency custody orders for 8 hours. Anyone else?
Good question.
Yes, ma'am.
Process like you have a call, emergency call, and you take someone into Northgate or the hospital. Do you follow up to see if 2 weeks better, and are they getting better? And do you have repeat calls for the same individual?
Well, it's yes and no and no. So, we try to follow up as much as possible on someone if we, this isn't gonna, if we can. We are certainly limited by the number of officers that our department is allowed to employ. And as our service calls rise, of course, that's probably going to increase at some time. But the bulk of that responsibility of checking on someone afterwards usually falls to Western Tidewater Community Service Board. They have a lot of programs for that. The second part of your question was, yes. We have several repeat, even though they go in for treatment for a variety of reasons. We have one young lady that it's not a stable home environment that she's in, and she doesn't get the home care that she needs. She doesn't get that support from family. We had a young lady, she was in her 40s, I believe, without saying who or where she lived. She had no family here. She was extremely bipolar. Her family had pretty much deserted her. She was sort of stabilized for quite a while, but because the family had cut all ties with her, her daughter was graduating from college and they didn't invite her, and that sent her on a downward spiral. By the time we got involved, she was down to 89 pounds because we didn't know. The apartment that she was living in, she had no family, no friends. She came out on the balcony one night and was screaming, and that's how we got involved. When we found her, she was, by the time we got her to the hospital, we were told that if we hadn't gotten to her that night, she probably would have died. And we've had repeat incidences with her, but not through any fault of the police department, not through any fault of Western Tidewater, and probably not through any fault of hers, just because she doesn't have enough support system. Unfortunately for society, and this is a proven statistic, for those that are mentally ill, the one who gives out health-wise before the mentally ill person is the caregiver. Especially with, let's take someone that is suffering from extreme paranoia schizophrenia. That's a 24-hour job. Someone with Alzheimer's, when they get to where they are advanced Alzheimer's, it's a 24-hour job. My stepmother, who was married to my dad for 45 years, he, in the last stages of his Alzheimer's, she refused to put him in a home. But you can't go to sleep because they don't sleep. So you don't get to go to sleep and just think that, oh, they're going to stay in bed. Somebody's got to be up with them. Same thing with an autistic child. Same thing with someone that is suffering from, someone that has bipolar. They can go for what, Karen? A week without sleep?
Sometimes.
So who's staying up with that person? If oftentimes it's just a mom and a child. Mom has a job. That's how she's paying for rent and food. Who stays up with that child while that child is up for a week? And by the time they call us, you know, they're looking at us as the last saviors. And we don't have all the answers, guys, because we don't have all the resources. In a perfect world, we would, but we don't. So support sometimes, it's debatable on what we can give them. We try our best. I think Western Tidewater, especially from the other cities that I've seen, I think they do an excellent job of trying to follow through. But again, you know, the government, they cut a lot of resources for us, so it makes it kind of difficult. Just to give you an example, Eastern State, there's 3 state facilities in the state of Virginia: Eastern State, Western State, and Mid-State. Easy to remember, and I think we can figure out which side of the state they're on. So, in its heyday, by the time the Clinton era came along, it had about 5,000 people at Eastern State alone. We're now down to 145 beds because of budgets, funding. It's not there. It's kind of a, we're kind of in a catch-22. We don't want them in jail because to the average cost of a taxpayer, for someone that stays in the state of Virginia in a regional, this includes regional jail, state jails, correctional facilities, all of those. The average right now, and this statistic is probably about 3 years old, the average citizen taxpayer for one person to stay a year in jail is close to $100,000. And that's coming out of our pockets. That's who pays for jails. So if we can get them in a mental health facility and stabilize them within 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, or whatever, and get them back out on the street, it's more cost, what am I looking for? Effective, thank you, if we can go that route. But we don't have the facilities. We don't have the beds. It often takes hours for Karen to find a facility that's got a bed. And that's one of the laws that changed. If most of you know about Cray Deeds and his son, he was a senator, and his son committed suicide shortly after stabbing his father several times. And Cray Deeds was instrumental in getting the laws changed, so that now that emergency custody order that was 4 hours, which is now 8 hours, if we cannot find a facility, if Karen can't find a facility, the state has to take them if they're doing a temporary detention order. So that's kind of a plus. The biggest plus that came up with it is that they're now linked by computer to all the psychiatric facilities so that they're aware of where available beds were. Because it used to be that we would only transport locally. We would maybe transport to Williamsburg, Riverside, Virginia Beach site. Sometimes we go to Emporia in Eastern State. Now, if Karen finds us a bed in, let's say, Staunton, Virginia, which is on the other side of Charlottesville, we're driving to Staunton, Virginia. We have to go anywhere in the state where there's an available bed. So that's kind of good. It hurts the department because of manpower, but that's a good thing that we have more facilities available to us to seek treatment. Yes, ma'am.
Question, did you say it went from 5,000 beds in the Continental to 145?
About 145, right, Karen?
Currently 145.
Yeah, that's at Eastern State. I'm not sure about Western State or Mid-State, but yes, ma'am.
And y'all y'all access private facilities here also?
Yes, ma'am. That's all facilities. So if a private facility doesn't have any beds throughout the state, they cannot find an available bed, we are required to take them to Eastern State from here. Anyone else? Well, Karen, I think I'm going to turn this over to you and let you give them everything they need to know about
Okay.
everything you do.
All right. All right. Thank you. I'm Karen Nicely, and I am the clinical administrator of, among other things, our crisis and forensic services. Is this one working? Not so much? Okay. Thanks. And that means that the staff, myself and my staff, work with individuals both in the community, in Western Tidewater Regional Jail, Southampton County Jail, those that are going through the court process that also have mental illness. And I hope the takeaway tonight for you all is how committed your community is to those suffering from mental illness, substance use disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's kind of a mouthful, but I want you to remember again how committed your communities are to you, okay, and your family members. I particularly want to thank Suffolk Police Department for sponsoring this event. Several members of their command are here. Major's in the back there, okay? Very important for you to understand how much, particularly Chief Bennett has invested in making sure that Suffolk Police Department and anyone that works there understands mental illness and how to respond appropriately. That's really what it's all about. People have responded perhaps inappropriately in the past because they didn't know. And so we want to make sure here that they do know how to respond. And Sergeant Balzer referenced our CIT, or Crisis Intervention Training. We just kind of say CIT all the time. So forgive me if I say that again, because I'm sure I will, okay? This has been a huge investment of personnel and time and resources between Suffolk Police Department, Western Tidewater CSB, and the surrounding sheriff's offices and police departments. So every police department, every sheriff's office in the western Tidewater area participates in CIT training. It is available to all officers of all departments, including the jail staff, by the way. We have also trained individuals from outside of our jurisdiction. When we have a spot available, we will invite others to come to the training. We have trained police officers from Port Eustis. We have trained officers from Hampton Roads Regional Jail, from Norfolk Police Department, and others, and that's all I'm going to remember right this minute. Okay.
We've actually trained to the airport too.
That's right, the International Airport, Norfolk International Airport, that's correct. So we understand that mental illness is a chronic relapsing condition, and crisis is part of having mental illness, okay? It is more or less depending on lots and lots of factors, but it's no more that we think, oh, we'll get this person stable and they'll never have a problem again. That's not the way it works. It's not the way it works with any chronic illness, right? If you were to go to the doctor and you had diabetes, okay, and every single time you went to the doctor, they tested your blood sugar and it was exactly 111. I think that's a good number. I'm not sure, okay? That's unrealistic. That's not going to happen. There are going to be constant adjustments based on all kinds of things, not the least of which are stress, lifestyle choices. Nobody makes perfect lifestyle choices. Raise your hand if you've always made perfect lifestyle choices.
Oh, I know I have.
Stop joking. Yeah. I know you. That's not true. It's one of our staff members, so I know better, right? Okay? That's not the way it happens. That's not realistic, okay? And we know that. So, really important to remember that your community is investing in you, okay? Very important to remember that. And that's true whether you're here in Suffolk or whether you're in Franklin or Southampton or Isle of Wight or the town of Smithfield or the town of Windsor, okay? Your community is investing in you. And part of their investment is in training their first responders. When we get enough officers, police officers and sheriff's deputies trained, we'll start expanding out hopefully to fire and rescue and EMS and all those folks as well. The longer we keep doing the training, the more people will get involved, okay? So part of their investment, your community's investment in you, is training their officers to respond appropriately, okay? You heard Dispatcher Hughes talk about that very first step often is that phone call to dispatch, and why they ask so many questions, okay? Because they want to know what they can do to help. It's that simple, okay? So we train. We also focus on consumer, that's our word for the folks that we deal with, consumer and officer safety, okay? Now, that is not always a matter of, yes, they have safety regulations that when they're transporting in their vehicles, the person has to be in handcuffs, and they put them in the back seat instead of the front seat for all the reasons that Sergeant Balzer already told us, okay? But another part of safety is understanding what to do and what not to do, what makes the situation escalate and what makes the situation de-escalate, okay? So safety is all important, okay? And then beyond that, the partnership between law enforcement and mental health, which is what CIT is all about. And that's also true at our jails. Sergeant Balzer let you know, I have 2 full-time staff at Western Tidewater Regional Jail right now just to care for the mental health needs of the individuals that are incarcerated there. That should tell you something about the numbers, okay? So, and then again, we have people that help people as they go through the court process, okay? So people do become involved in the criminal justice system as a result of their mental illness. In this day and time, it's still happening. But our goal with CIT is to reduce injury, keep everybody safe, make sure we make a commitment to those in our communities that are suffering from mental illness, and also to divert from the criminal justice system wherever possible. That is not where we want people to have to get treatment, right? So the more we can do on the front end as an agency, okay, the more we want to. So you always have 911. There was a non-emergency number that was posted as well that you can call and dial 0 to get to the dispatcher because maybe you need information, or maybe you want to ask a question, or maybe for whatever reason that's who you could find at that point in time and you need to talk. All of those things are great, okay? But we want you also to know that our department, emergency services, are available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, you name it. We have somebody on duty, okay? So we really want you to call us before it becomes a crisis. It's okay to call us when it's a crisis. We can handle that too. That's okay. But if you can call us before it becomes a crisis, okay, that's easier on everybody, okay? And we might ask some of those questions as well. What's been happening? Do you have a doctor? Do you have access to medication? Some people get prescriptions for medication and they don't have access to that medication. That prescription doesn't do you a lot of good if you can't pay for it, right? So at Western Tidewater CSB, we may be that first point of contact in emergency services, okay, or at the jail, and then we link back to services once somebody is released. But we have so many other programs at our agency, okay, from birth all the way up, okay? We have early intervention services for young children. We have all kinds of children's services. We have something called case management that links people to resources, gives them information, helps them and advocates for them in any arena, whether it's with the schools, etc. We have programs for children in the schools. We have programs for children that come to the home. We have a specialized crisis team for kids. We call it Children's Mobile Crisis, or Kids Crisis for short, okay? Just recently, we had the awesome opportunity to develop a specialized crisis team for our children who have intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. And Renee Hanna, who is my office mate, by the way, is here tonight, and she heads up that team. So if you want to ask questions after everything's over, find Renee. She's in that very cool white hat and yellow shirt, okay? Find her and ask her about everything they do. They go all over our region, all the way from the Eastern Shore up to Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, Williamsburg, James City County, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, everywhere, okay, her team, okay? For adults, and I'm sure I've forgotten something for kids, but forgive me. Psychiatry services, okay? We have the only child psychiatrists in our entire region that work for Western Tidewater CSB. In fact, we have the only psychiatrists in our entire region for adults as well, which is not a good thing. We really need to develop bringing resources into the private sector as well in our area. Most people have to go outside of our area to see a psychiatrist, okay? For adults, we have a specialized care team, and I hope I'm going to say that exactly right, that helps people when they are experiencing that first episode of psychosis. And the whole goal of that team is to intervene with somebody and their family and their support system, whatever that may be, to help them get stabilized right from the very beginning and not kind of have that pattern of the ups and downs until they're, somewhere in their 40s and they get stabilized for the first time. That's too many lost years, okay? We want to help these individuals get stabilized at the very onset of their illness and learn the independent living skills and the life management skills that they need to be able to go on and participate in society and be successful. And Deborah, Paul, that just like went right out of my head, in this beautiful red suit is here, and she is the supervisor of that program. So come see her after this is over and find out more about what they do, okay? And then we have case management services for adults. We have oh my gosh, I can't think of everything we have for adults. We have mental health skill building, which helps people, again, develop either independent living skills and/or employment skills. We have peer support services at our agency, which means those that have the lived experience of mental illness who can then reach back and share that experience and help somebody else as they walk that walk as well. And we have several members of our peer support services that are here tonight. We have what we call a clubhouse or psychosocial rehab. And that is a program, day program, that individuals with mental illness come to from about 8:30 until about 3:30. Vans usually go out and pick them up and bring them in, and they have breakfast and they have lunch. And it's a tremendous support for those individuals who usually remain hidden or isolated in the community. It's a place where they can come and be with other people who understand what they're going through. It's a place where they can come and learn about their illness, learn about recovery. We have our doctor will actually come to see them at Clubhouse, so they don't even have to have a separate appointment a lot of times. Gosh, help me remember what else. What am I forgetting? Oh, goodness sakes, the brand new PACT team. And that stands for Assertive Community Treatment, but I don't know what the P stands for. What does that stand for? I'm not sure either. But anyway, PACT, sorry. But it is a specialized care team as well for individuals with chronic relapsing mental illness. They go out to those individuals, they check on them. Somebody asked about follow-up for folks. They check on them, they make sure they've got their medicine, they help them set up their pill box, they help them go buy groceries, they help them learn how to cook, learn how to do laundry, anything they need. And that team will check on them as long as they're willing to stay in services. And I will tell you that that to me is one of the most wonderful programs because again, it's a chronic relapsing condition. So your community is investing in you. Our whole job, okay, is to help keep people safe. We do that several ways, and that is by training first responders, okay, by responding ourselves in emergencies, and then by having programs that we can then pass people to once the emergency has resolved so that they can get that ongoing care that they really need and supports that they really need, okay? We understand that this really is a chronic relapsing condition. Please, if you can, spread the word for people to call us when things are starting maybe to sort of take a slide. Let us talk with you, let us work with you or your family members at that point, even short of having to get to the point where you're calling dispatch. But should you need to, know that there's a tremendous partnership between mental health and law enforcement in your communities that will make sure that if you need the help of law enforcement, and that's really what they're there for. I know everybody thinks of police as they're going to, law and order lock you up, right? But really, when it comes to responding to individuals with mental illness, their job is to help, okay? And to partner with us so that together we can keep people safe and help them, okay? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
The children that you meet and help get assistance, have you seen a success in them handling mental illness better as adults, or have you seen from children onset to they grew up and you think they're handling it healthier than if they hadn't had treatment?
That's a wonderful question, and I will tell you that I think our Achilles heel is we don't do enough outcome studies. But in about a year, Deborah Hall is going to have some statistics for us because her program just started, and that's a huge part of what they're doing as well, is figuring out what works. It's really a big part of their program is actually research, and you're absolutely right. More and more research is needed to figure out, does what we are doing really work? Okay, and yes, absolutely, the kids that have the opportunity to be stabilized, many of them do better and go on to lead routine, boring old lives like the rest of us, okay? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this question pertains to you, Karen, or the lieutenant. I stepped outside. I don't know if anyone asked. I just want to know something about the ECO. And I know you say the ECO is only for 8 hours. For example, after 8 hours, and let's say if I wanted to put an ECO on someone, you go to the magistrate office and put the ECO, and you go looking for that person. If you don't find that person 8 hours, can you renew that ECO?
Yes. Yes, you can. But you have to wait 24 hours. You cannot do 2 ECOs in a 24-hour period of time unless there is new and additional information. So what can happen is you find out not only is the person missing and you know they're suffering from mental illness and they've made threats to want to harm themselves, then you find out that they actually have a knife at their disposal. That's new information. You can go and get a new ECO.
And also, let me just say that the emergency custody order, that 8 hours doesn't start counting down
Right.
until, let's say that
Until the person's in
we've
custody.
decided that Karen needs to be emergency custody order issued on her, okay? The clock doesn't start ticking till I actually have Karen
In custody.
in my custody.
Right.
And at that point, that 8 hours starts counting down.
But
And-
the actual order is good for
For
up to 24 hours.
hours.
That gives time in case you cannot immediately locate the
Right.
person. Yeah. Good questions. Anything else?
Yeah, that was an excellent question. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The CIT or the CTI?
CIT? Yes, sir.
How many officers do you have working in that department?
You mean on any given day, or how many do we have totally? Totally, we have, it's like 186.
So all those officers are trained to handle.
Right now, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 65, maybe closer to 70,
And-
that are actually trained and that have,
Certification. I
yes,
guess you said.
certification, yes.
And what,
Been through the class and training.
That have been through the 40 hours, and most of them have been through the 8-hour additional mental health first aid training that
Right.
Karen and them give.
see, that's a really good question. Thank you. Because what happens is the departments, the different law enforcement agencies, particularly Suffolk PD, tries to make sure that they have a CIT trained officer on each shift in each sector. Okay? And so what you do, and what I forgot to say, and thank you for reminding me, is if you do call into dispatch, ask for a CIT officer. If they have one, that's who they will send. So that's a great question. It's okay, ask for a CIT officer.
That's who I'm going to ask.
Yes, yes.
And we do have quite a few constantly on shift. And one of the things I will tell you is that the Department of Criminal Justice, what they are doing now is looking at providing this training in the academies as well. That's how important it is, how huge it is across the nation. So the academy that we send our rookies to right now, which each city has their own time frame for how long their academy is. Some are 6 months, some are 7 months, some are as much as or as little as 4 months, but they have ongoing training within their department once they get through that 4 months. The academies, the one that we go to, which is Hampton Roads Regional Academy, they're now looking at implementing a abbreviated form of crisis training at the academy, knowing that they'll come back to the department and get the additional 40 hours of training as a CIT officer, crisis intervention officer. So it's critical training across the nation. The Department of Criminal Justice is taking a huge look at what departments are doing to train their officers to be aware of what the needs are and how to handle them. And it definitely impacts the training that we did, Karen had to submit the training curriculum to the Department of Criminal Justice and get it approved as to
Right.
what we were going to teach in our 40-hour class. So we don't just get to put together a program and say, this is what we're going to teach. It is approved. And they made some changes. Some of the things we sent to them, they were like, this isn't going to work. You've got to make it better than that. And so the training that we provide for our crisis intervention officers, the curriculum, the course of instruction that we train had to be approved by the Department of Criminal Justice before we could actually start training it. So it's not just a quick program that we've put together. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, a lot of work. Yes, sir.
One more question. It's not related to the
No, that's
subject,
okay.
But I recently applied to do officer here and so forth. But
Very
I only followed up like kind of lightly. I only followed up lightly. I didn't keep up with it because I was in the process of looking for other jobs too. But I actually applied to be a police officer.
Very cool.
And who I was working with was Detective. You got, I bet you guys know him.
I might. I tell you what, see me afterwards and
Yeah.
we'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about it, okay?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions for Karen or anything we can answer for you, Dispatcher Hughes, before we say thank you for coming? And this is our first class, and we are looking forward to hopefully getting more out into the community and letting them know what we have.
Quick question, I didn't mean to put a question. I just want to know, in the jail system, inmates who come in there to suffer with an MI, do y'all separate them from the other inmates?
Depends. It depends on what the need is. If there's a reason, only if there's a reason, if they're not stable, if they cannot be safe in general population, for their safety only, not automatically. Not automatically. It's really all about their
It's a case by
safety.
case.
It's evaluated each person as they go in.
Anyone else? Well, I really want to thank you guys for coming to our first ever. We were a little nervous, as you can tell, but we really appreciate you coming out.
Right.
Please go out and tell your families
Yeah.
what we're all about. Tell your friends, your neighbors, and we'll probably try to hold another one in the upcoming months, maybe towards the fall, because I know everybody likes to go on vacation in the summertime. But this wasn't just a one-time, we just want to tell you we're here and say goodbye. We always want to be available to you, okay? Thank
Thank you.
you.